What's going on, top 5 scary family, and welcome back. SCP monsters are quite memorable. They take on the shape of many creatures and objects, and some of them look quite innocent. But that, of course, is not always the case. See, some SCP monsters are capable of killing you within seconds, and you'd never be able to tell. It's amazing. Usually when you first hear about some of them, you immediately feel anxious. Like you picture yourself in that scenario and you're like, ooh, no, like if it attacks you if you blink, I hate this. Why is this a thing? Yeah, our last video, attacks you if you blink. You have to always stare at it. Very scary. Look into it. So that being said, of course, there are more of these things to add on to. So here to break down our top 5 SCP monsters you've never heard of, I'm Taylor McWatters. And before we dive in, make sure you tap the little subscribe button over there. It helps a lot, and I like pushing things. Why don't you just go ahead, click it, just try it out. Starting off the list at number 5, we have SCP-184. This Euclid class SCP has a pretty unique containment setup. SCP-184 must be attached to a high power electromagnet at all times, and those aren't easy to find. I say like I've been looking for an electromagnet. I'm like, trust me, you gotta order them. And if something happens where the electromagnet fails, agents must report to its containment area, of course. So its containment area being that of a park. It looks like a park. And SCP-184 is meant to resemble a statue almost. Like it looks like a mask in a way, I don't know. It has 2 eye holes and a smaller mouth hole type thing with like round tips along the side. There's probably a photo. I'm explaining it while I'll do a Will Smith. It's described to be small, smooth, and metallic in nature. So what happens if you get in this containment area? Well, SCP-184 is also known as the Architect, and that's for good reason. See, it makes the room's dimensions grow drastically. Like, I'm talking a lot. The room stays the same on the outside, so you'd never be able to tell. But inside, the room grows several hundred meters each day. That's wild. What's the rent like on this place? Can I put an offer down? Let's do it. Oh yeah, it has 100 bathrooms. Next week, it'll have 200 bathrooms. It's great. So it expands until it's about 3 times the size of the original room. Then it creates smaller rooms and copies materials from inside the structure. So there's a lot going on. A lot of shit's changing in this. But through the expansion process, materials will start to break down. So all the copied materials from in the structure that gets placed out into smaller rooms will start to change. And this is the coolest part. So like books will be made of glass, or a microwave will be made of wood. Doors will open into blank walls. What a nightmare that would be. Oh my God. Like if I was walking through the same room over and over again, that's one thing. But then to look over and see my phone charger and it's made of like peanut butter or something, I'd be so upset. Number 4, SCP-527. This dude rocks. Okay, you're gonna love this one. Found in Boston by Foundation agents in 2002, this Euclid class SCP is a human man with a suit. Only his head is actually a fish's head. He kind of reminds me of Admiral Akbar from Star Wars. He's like, it's a trap. SCP-527, it's a trap. So if you're wondering whether or not a little fish man can speak or not, yeah, he could totally speak. There's even an interview on his file in the SCP Foundation, and they thank him firstly for doing the interview, and he's like, all right, no problem. Like he's totally normal about it. Then they ask if he can breathe underwater, and he's like, no, I cannot. He's literally just a guy, and he was born like that. He even ends the dry interview by saying, I'm just a guy with a fish head. If I know. And honestly, you couldn't have said it better, SCP-527. Our dude also goes by the name of Mr. Fish. I feel like he could have done better. He's even tatted up too, believe it or not. He's got like a tattoo on the bottom of his left foot that reads Mr. Fish from Little Misters by Wondertainment. So that name actually marks Mr. Fish as part of a collection in the SCP family to 19 other similar individuals, some of which going by the name of Mr. Soap, Mr. Laugh, Mr. Hungry, and of course, one of our Mr. Fish. Number 3, SCP-053, also known as the Young Girl. This one reminds me a lot of the world's current state in a way, you know? SCP-053 is that of a Euclid class, and it has the appearance of a young girl. So about 3 years old, give or take, this is how old she is. Her mental development is above average. So she's capable of basic speech, and she must be contained in a room that's 16 by 16 feet. And in her containment area, she also needs her books, games, toys, basically anything that a bored 3-year-old would want. So she doesn't get bored of using the same items because they switch them around every 3 months. That would suck though. I mean, if you're in the middle of Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire and someone's like, and 3 months, boom, next one. I don't care if you were done. That book's so thick too. She's given the proper 3 meals a day and even up to 2 snacks too a day if she asks for them. Bedding, of course, is provided. She has a bathroom, the whole setup. Now, what is the deal with this chick? What would happen if I wanted to talk to the young girl? Well, I mean, she's 3 years old, so you probably wouldn't be able to relate on too many things, but no can do. Like I said earlier, this is a Euclid class SCP, which means you don't want to find out too much about them. No physical contact can be made with the young girl unless you're rocking the full containment suit with an eye shield. So no secret handshakes unless you're all suited up. And that's important too. Only one person is allowed to go in at a time. I mean, I'm not sure why. Usually 3-year-olds are kind of boring. Not the most thrilling stories, that's for sure. But after you enter, you're secured by a line of steel cable and you cannot hang out for longer than 10 minutes. What happens after that? You get bored and you fall asleep. No. Basically, any human who makes contact with the young girl physically or just hanging out in the general area longer than 10 minutes, you'll rapidly become irrational, paranoid, and homicidal. Ooh, okay, talk about going from 0 to 100. But it gets worse. Don't worry, it gets worse. So after this happens, you start to become homicidal. You try and kill every other human around you before saving SCP-53 for last. But killing her is not an easy task, or else she wouldn't be here in the first place. In fact, you won't even be able to kill her. As soon as you start to attack SCP-53, you will suffer massive heart attacks or seizures. Either way, you'll die in seconds. And the young girl, well, she'll instantly regenerate from the altercation. No wounds, no nothing, and then she'll go back reading Charlotte's Web or whatever. Number 2, SCP-224. This one's awesome and pretty trippy. So SCP-224 is commonly referred to as the grandfather clock because it is. Yeah, this is a Euclid class SCP and it's a wooden grandfather clock stored in a soundproof containment. Soundproof. V important. So what happens if this clock begins to chime, as most do? Well, you age drastically. Not just like a few days, like you get old fast. You want to get old? Get old fast. Like it happens quick. You don't want to hear these chimes because each chime you hear causes a drastic localized temporal acceleration. So people and objects too, this is important, within the sound range are all affected. So some chimes could literally make you age like a small amount, maybe a week or two. So small you don't even notice it really. But sometimes your house could like collapse and fall on you and decay if you own this clock. Like when SCP-224 was first discovered, it had been found in rubble underneath the remnant of this collapsed house, and of course underneath all of that were the bodies of a husband and wife who had the misfortune of finding it in an antique store and hearing its chimes. The clock itself has some interesting capabilities physically, you know, besides the whole let's get old quick thing. The hands of the clock don't move with any consistency. Usually it's moving clockwise, but it's hard to tell given the fact that the numbers on the clock move around and shift slightly. So even if this thing only did chime at a certain time, it would be impossible to pinpoint when exactly it's going to happen. This is wild. The fact that it looks like a normal clock, this thing has probably just ruined so many lives. Imagine not knowing about this. What time is it? I think it's like quarter after, I don't know, I'm 85 and I can't see now, so what the hell just happened? And finally, number 1, because it's so fitting for Halloween, SCP-035. This last SCP monster on our list, by the way, I say monster, I mean sure these things don't look like Frankenstein per se, but a heater class mask that makes you decay until you're dead if you come in contact with it, that is a monster. That is a haunted mask. Now, we refer to these SCPs as monsters because they're scary, and at least a good amount of them are pretty scary. So SCP-035 has the appearance of a mask. It's one of those comedy and tragedy masks. And for starters, it can bounce back and forth, changing its appearance from comedy to tragedy. And any photos or videos of the mask will also change to match its new look. So if you make a sick boomerang with the mask on, you're like, yeah, this is sweet, and it's all smiley, it might not look the same a week later. You might just be like, and it might be a sad mask, and that just doesn't work. Doesn't work for the likes. Also, if you were to touch this mask, let alone wear it, you would of course not live to tell the tale. This highly corrosive liquid that seeps from its eyes and mouth holes, the liquid isn't visible from the back, so it doesn't even seep out the back, actually. So it's a mask that's radioactive. Oh great, it's not scary at all, awesome. Well, SCP-35 has this effect where anybody near it has the urge to put it on. It's kind of like me when I'm near like anything chocolate. I'm like, ooh, should I do it? I'm gonna do it. Now, if you have the misfortune of letting this mask get in your head and persuade you into putting it on, the mask will actually get in your thoughts. It haunts you. That's a monster. I'm gonna call that a monster. The subject wearing the mask will even claim to be the consciousness contained within that mask, SCP-35. And then after that point, decay is amplified, leaving you into this mummy-like corpse on the ground. So if you're wearing the mask, you can have a brief conversation, or rather this consciousness that's taking over you can have a brief conversation. It's pretty charming too. Like if you put it on, it knows how to talk, it knows how to communicate with people. It's kind of class A until it randomly decides to enter a sadistic state where it then prompts you to commit suicide and turn others around you into mindless servants. So if you're thinking about grabbing SCP-35 and going trick-or-treating, you might want to dress up as a Toon Squad member instead. Might be a bit safer. And before we wrap up, I'm going to read a few comments from one of our last videos, Top 5 SCP Monsters You Can't Escape Part 2. Okay, so our first comment comes from Adrian Garcia, and they say, "Dang it, Taylor, this is the second time I'm craving ramen when watching this channel." And then in brackets he goes, "Pause this video, makes ramen, sits back down, resumes video." That's what I'm here for. I'm pretty sure that's what YouTube was made for. So people have something to put on in the background while they destroy some ramen, some beef flavored ramen. That's our only goal, Adrian, so I'm glad you caught on. Undercover Boss Ramen Edition. Next one comes from Colin Ritzinger, and they say, "Can we please talk about how Taylor has the best hoodie ever? I love it and I hate myself for just ordering the chicken flavored one." Okay, chicken's fine. Chicken's good. It'll get the job done, okay? But as soon as you see beef, you don't have that conversation in your head. You just grab it. Chicken, it's always like, I don't know, is it enough flavor? Some are better than the others. You see beef and you're like, always a banger, always a slap. Debit? Let's go. And our last one comes from Kenny Goldsmith, and it's possibly the best noodle-related comment because there were a lot on this list. And they say SCP-372 is secretly Taylor the Noodle McWatters. The noodle in quotations. Sorry, dude, the secret is out, LOL. Hashtag Noodleification Squad. Okay, well, that's the best hashtag I've now seen in my entire life, so I think it's fair to wrap it up right now. Thanks, Kenny. Okay, thanks for watching, guys. If you haven't by now, please hit that subscribe button, and while you're there, just head on over and tap that notification bell. That way you get notified when we do our live videos. Then we can all talk about my noodle neck in the comments live as we watch it. I'm Taylor McWatters. Stay safe. See ya.